us again. We are AWS On Air, and we're back with our second day of coverage of Reinforce. I'm A.M. Grabelny. You're going to be seeing my face a lot today, and you're going to be seeing my friend Farah's face a lot today, too. We've got a lot of sessions coming up for you with great content focused on security. I'm a solution architect here at AWS. If you've got questions, please put them in chat. We'll see them. We have people in chat answering questions for you as well. But Farah, please tell the people about yourself as well.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Farah Campbell. I'm a senior product marketing manager at AWS, focusing on containers and serverless. I'm having a great time learning all things about security here at Reinforce, and excited to continue learning more today.
We've got a wonderful guest.
We do.
Too.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm Rich McDonough. I'm worldwide specialist solutions architect. I work on observability solutions.
All right. Now, observability is a hot word. I think it's gained a lot of traction in the past couple of years. But does every team need observability, Rich?
Oh.
What do you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Setting you up with an easy question.
That was an easy question, absolutely. No, life without observability is pain. So if you can't see what's going on in your environment, if you don't have that kind of visibility into what's actually taking place inside of your workload, you're just setting yourself up for a really bad time. So what I want to talk about today is some of the solutions that we have that can alleviate that pain, give everybody a much better operating experience. So with that, you guys want me to just take it away?
Oh, wow. We're jumping right into the demo. That's fast, Rich. I love this.
I'm fast. I am all about the do it live demos.
Okay, I love
absolutely,
it.
Absolutely.
Jumping right in.
Yeah, so especially from a security perspective, there's going to be a lot here that is super relevant. So what I'm actually going to start with, what you see here, this is a view of what we call service lens. And the data that you see here is all drawn from live transaction traces in a real running environment. Now, there's a lot going on in this particular environment. I'm not going to walk you through all of it. Don't worry. We don't have enough time for that, unfortunately. But let's say that you need to identify traffic in your app that corresponds to a specific flow. So let's say purchases. In my particular case, it's going to be kittens, because I like animals.
I like animals, too.
So what I've done here is I've actually zoomed in on just transaction traces that relate to a specific flow in my app. And this view is super, super useful. I can take any one of these nodes in this environment, and I can get immediately a lot more information about the health and the operating of that particular node. So here we see the latency for the request coming into one of my microservices. I can see how many requests are actually taking place. I don't have any alerts on these services right now. It's a good thing. We like that. I got response time. I have a world of data that I have just here. I didn't have to do anything in particular to set up this view either. I'm just sending in telemetry, and it's auto-drawing the environment for me. I can also see things like what the actual response time is and the throughput between two different components in my environment. Now, if you're having a bad day, this is going to be your best friend. You're going to be able to come in here, and you can see where things are being slow. And while I don't really have too many errors going on right now, kind of wish that I did in a way, this would be where you could see nice red indicators of where things are actually going sideways. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show a bit of a dashboard view that we can also draw based on what's actually taking place. So let's say, heaven forbid, hope it never happens to anybody, but you're being subjected to a denial of service attack. It happens.
It does.
You need to have metrics around that to indicate that you are under attack so that you can start to take proactive action so that you can have a much easier time getting back to normal. So in here, luckily I have no 500s right now, but I could. What if the number of requests that I had started spiking just to one particular part of my environment? You could see this here right away.
So you talked about there, that you needed to have metrics, to prevent against these attacks. Can you talk a little bit about, how teams decide what metrics are important to observe?
Oh yeah. So this is probably the top conversation that I have with our customers all the time. So they'll say, I need to see as much of my environment as I can. And I'm going to say, just hold on for a second. You need to see what matters, right? So if you're a company that sells things on the internet, if you're an e-commerce retailer, you need to care about metrics that are related to your sales, to your throughput, to your uptime, measuring if your customers are having a good time on your website, looking at retention, abandoned carts. These are all business metrics, but what you want to do when you dive into your environment is focus on those components that impact that bottom line. The things that matter to your business, identify those and then work backwards. So for example, if you're somebody who has a website that becomes slow, if your CPUs are overloaded on your EC2 instances, you need to measure that. But if that's not your critical concern, if you have to worry about how many items are in a queue, or even like slow JavaScript on a web page, focus on those components and then build your view out to show those things that are most important to you.
Rich, can I jump in and ask a question too about? So you mentioned you didn't really have to do much to get this to start sending telemetry, right?
Nope.
And one of the very difficult things about having microservice, for example, microservice architecture, is things can get kind of cattywampus, where you don't really know like where this thing is or what it's doing, and oftentimes you don't want to have to spend a lot of time instrumenting that thing also. And so traditionally in APM or application performance monitoring, you have to have an agent or maybe some sort of library. What are the options when you want to do observability with AWS for getting started, getting telemetry into the system?
So those options are actually pretty good, very convenient. It depends a little bit on how your workload is actually constructed. So if you're running in AWS Lambda, you can just turn on active tracing with a click of a button, or of course do it in code with CloudFormation or Terraform or whatever solution makes sense for you. When you enable that, that'll actually turn on the Xray service in that environment. And then without even having to do much, or in some cases even anything in the code, you're going to start to see a view that looks a little bit like this, where we're drawing these connections between API gateways, between Lambda functions, up to S3 and other components. And we're not limited just to those things that run natively inside of AWS either. So as you see here, these things that have these little gear icons all over my view, those could be remote endpoints. Yeah. Now, this is a little bit of a contrived example, obviously. I don't think I'm sending too much data to 169.254, but I could be. But you can instrument your calls going to anything. In fact, I have a little bit of an example of that here. I pulled this one.
This would include like hybrid environments and things that run outside of AWS as well?
Oh, 100%. Okay. 100%. And by the way, you can still use open telemetry with this approach as well.
Oh, cool.
So this is not meant to be building any kind of walls around your workload. This is meant to be an open system, embracing open source at every turn. But what I have here is an actual trace that's gone through a little bit of a contrived many hop example in my environment. But we can see right here how long it takes to service various parts of the request. You can see the total composition of the response back to the end user. And we've gone ahead and instrumented a whole bunch of the most important components here. From a security perspective, though, I'm going to actually pop down to the bottom, and I'm going to talk about annotations for a second. So here we go. So we see a little bit of information about this particular part of a request. We'll see some of the resources involved. This is actually written in Go using the Xray SDK. But these annotations are one of the most powerful tools that we have in our toolbox. If you have an API gateway, if you have any kind of application in your environment that can stamp a part of a transaction trace with metadata, then you can use that to search through all of your traces for that information. So if you want to look for, let's say you have an annotation that comes in with a customer ID or some other bit of environmental information, say the code for the data center that a request first came from. And if you need to backtrack that kind of activity in your environment, it can be stamped on the request right from the get-go, and then it follows through your entire chain. So then at the end of the day, if you want to see, in this case, everything that has to do with bunnies, just because, again, animals. I can search for bunnies, and I'm going to have this whole view of all of the activity that has a trace related to a bunny. So very convenient. I've got all this data just pouring in here. This particular trace is actually composed of a combination of Xray SDK and the AWS distro for OpenTelemetry.
Oh, nice.
You don't even have to use just one. You can mix and match.
That's great. So, talking through the traces and really just this log data in general, right? Like, so it seems like there's some really great tooling built into AWS to actually, it's great to collect the data, but if I can't actually find anything within that data, because you're going to be generating a lot of telemetry data,
Oh, yes.
a ton, especially for very active services. What about pulling it into other systems? Like a lot of security teams will use SIM or security, forget what it stands for.
Yeah,
security information and event management.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for that, we have to pull it back for just a second to the
Sure.
three basic data types of observability. So it's metrics, logs, and traces. So what you're describing is very much a logs story.
Right.
It doesn't have to be just a log story.
Oh, interesting.
But from the logs perspective, I'm going to dash back over here for just a second. I am using CloudWatch logs for my log collection here, but what I'm going to do is first show that we can query log data, especially structured log data, in a very easy and intelligent way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this looks very similar to what you'd get in one of these systems, like in a SIM system.
Absolutely.
Sure.
But it's important to note, though, that, again, we're not building walls around this data. If you want to stream this data into a SIM, if you want to send it into OpenSearch, or if you want to stream it into even something like Kinesis and then treat it with a Lambda, perhaps do filtering or masking of data, these are all things that you can do. Like all the tools are just right here in the dashboard, just waiting to be consumed. This is a little bit of simplistic example. I was just looking for things that actually mention a specific string inside of the log. But that's going to be super important for your developers. If they need to look for those types of events, if they just want to filter on a log level, if they want to look for things that come from a particular container name, such as I've done here, all this data, it can be indexed in CloudWatch logs, and you can just take advantage of it.
Yeah, I've actually seen a couple customers, and I was trying to wrap my head around who was just talking about this, but they actually annotate on the logs when a specific thing has happened. So they would know when node 14 happened. So there's actually a line on the log where you could actually say that they upgraded to node 14.
Oh yeah.
And it's incredibly impactful for anybody who's just looking at it, because they can tell why something may be functioning differently.
Now, those labels are a key for success. It's a critical success factor. So it's a lot better of an approach than what I think a lot of us might have done when we first started learning how to write code. It's just dump everything to standard out and forget about it. A little bit more structuring to your logs is going to save you hours of headaches down the road. It just makes everything so much more efficient.
This is kind of pulled up a question in my mind too. Maybe you could talk a little bit, Rich, how observability plays into maybe reactive and proactive approaches that you're taking. Because I see this very much as proactive, right? This is something like, I want to monitor this particular thing happening at this specified annotation. But also, you mentioned that DDoS attack, which is more of a reactive stance that I need to take. I'm detecting that I'm getting a ton of traffic from these bogus IPs, right? So where do you see observability playing into those two kind of approaches, and what most customers are doing? What are most customers doing with that?
So I find that a lot of the customers I speak to are doing more what I just usually call monitoring. So red light, green light, is the car on or off? Yeah, useful, certainly. If the car is off, or worse yet, if you can't start the car, you need to have more information about why. So observability means being able to answer that question of why. So you got to work backwards from understanding why the car won't start. Are there signals that the car was putting out before you turn it off last? Like, was it shaking violently, for example, or some such? Did you check the oil? Whatever the examples are. In order to have that proactive approach to observability, not just the reactive, where you know something has gone wrong because your monitoring systems are saying so, you need to be able to collect enough data from inside of your app to know proactively when things are going sideways. I'm actually going to dash over to a dashboard view for just a second. So one of the things that we like to talk about is charting everything that you can. Have as much metrics as you would need in order to put together an understanding of your environment. So down here at the bottom, I actually create a time series, just a metric, of every time one of the pods in my Kubernetes cluster falls over. That's a leading indicator of issues. Every time I have a little spike here, that means one of my pods probably ran out of memory and crashed. I let my environment do this on purpose, because I like to show people how everything works. But one of the other things that we can focus in on that can help with both a proactive and a reactive mechanism is going to be anomaly detection. So I'm going to zoom back out to, let's say, the 6-week view. There we go. All right, so what you're looking at right here, this gray band that you see kind of crawling up, that's the anomaly detection band that's been calculated for CPU on my Kubernetes cluster. I didn't have to put any work into this other than just saying create anomaly detection. That was it.
Wow.
And then tie it to an alarm. But let's go ahead and zoom in, like right here, where things got really wacky. My environment actually has a bug. Again, I don't fix it because I like to talk about it. There's a CPU issue where the CPU usage climbs continually over about a 3-week period until the cluster kind of falls over. And that's what happened here. I don't have auto remediation turned on for that. I could. But what happened right here, cluster falls apart. And this red bit right here is when I actually terminated the nodes and behavior went back to normal. What you see when things go into this red state, that's outlier behavior. That means that during that period of time, things would have been in an alarm state. But I did not know in advance what good looked like, right? I didn't even know what bad looked like. I could use this system, just hand over the metrics to the anomaly detection model, have it look over the last 2 weeks of data, continue to become more and more accurate as you go forward in time. It will proactively tell me when things are going really, really bad. And it can reactively enable all kinds of useful workflows for me as well.
Super cool. And can you, like, if you're using like ISV tools for issues management, things like ServiceNow or Jira, can you use, the AWS observability tooling for those as well?
Oh yeah. Yeah. In fact, this is a thing I'm a huge proponent of. If you have existing ITSM workflows, don't reinvent the wheel. Use them, right? Like if you're using Jira, if you're using ServiceNow, if you're happy with them, if they do what you need, please keep using them. Absolutely. And you can just plug in directly into the CloudWatch alarms. You can use EventBridge to send data into these services. Everything that you see here, it can all be enabled for those style of integrations. And if you're not doing that today, you should.
Big
100%.
fan of EventBridge. I love EventBridge.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're learning all this stuff about, your applications and how they're actually working. And you may, like you said, Rich, discover something like this. And it's great to discover it, but then we got to do something about it, right? Unless you're rich and you don't fix it so that you can keep it in your demo.
That's right.
But usually, like a team needs to go have some sort of workflow pop up about this, and usually it's a ticket workflow, right? So that's great. I mean, again, monitoring this stuff is only so you can take action on it, typically, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we don't monitor just for the sake of monitoring, or just because we're very, eager and enthusiastic system administrators. We monitor because we've got goals, and the goals are usually keep the lights on, keep the business running, keep everybody making money. No news is good news, Yeah. That's what we like. But you can't get there unless you have an observability solution in place. So if you can't see what's happening, if you can't see that things are good or not good, or see what the trends are, you're just not setting yourself up for success.
Well, Rich, thank you for joining us. I mean, it ties back to the original, too. Like, how do I determine what to care about, right? You need these tenets guiding you.
You got it.
But we will be right back with more content from AWS On Air. Stick around.